currently 42 SpongeBob specials in total, offering everything from impossible to watch garbage to hilarious and emotionally compelling gems that truly push the limits of what a show like SpongeBob can do. And today, we're ranking every single one of them. Now, before we begin, we gotta define the difference between a special and an episode real quick, because until making this video, it felt kinda subjective to me. Basically, we're defining a special as longer than a regular episode, but shorter than a movie. Pretty simple, right? Oh, and just a heads up, some regular episodes were advertised as specials back in the day, even though they don't in any way feel like one. Take Plankton's Army, for example. Standard 11-minute runtime, no patchy segments, and ultimately a pretty typical feeling SpongeBob episode. To keep things consistent, we're sticking pretty tightly to extended runtime as our main criteria. Sound good? All right, lock and float. It's ranking time. Kicking off our list in the bottom of F tier, we got a SquarePants Family Vacation. Now, I would love to say that this is actually a really good special that just had to get the short end of the stick because one of them has to, but honestly, a SquarePants Family Vacation is actively unenjoyable. Mediocre is too high a praise to give this brain-dead, boring monstrosity. Seriously, I kid you not. Until getting back into SpongeBob shortly before making this channel, this was the episode that made me think, yeah, I'm done with this show, and put me off enough to stop watching altogether for a long time. I rewatched it in full, though, to see if it's any better than I remembered, and nope. The padding is so intense, it's painful. How does the episode fill its 22-minute runtime, I hear you ask? Well, it starts off with 2.5 minutes of SpongeBob convincing his friends to look at a slideshow. Then there's a car crash that lasts nearly 2 minutes before finally getting into a nails on chalkboard song that for some reason keeps getting repeated throughout the episode. For some reason, they treat SpongeBob and Patrick like small children in this episode, so it makes the episode feel like it's aimed at a younger demographic than it normally is. Unfortunately, this kind of makes the jokes feel like they're talking down to the audience from time to time. Finally, the entire second half of this episode is literally just SpongeBob and Patrick being lost in the woods and reacting to it for 10 whole minutes. Don't worry, most of the specials on this list are significantly better than this one, but yeah, I gotta be honest, this one lacks any real quality whatsoever. F tier's the only place that makes sense. Escape from Beneath Glove World. Season 12 is the worst season in the series to me, mainly because I'm not really a fan of the art style or writing, but I know it can do much better than this garbage considering Season 12 also gave us the excellent birthday Blowout 20th anniversary special. So much of this episode is just overreacting without nuance. Patrick and SpongeBob are dumbed down to a point where they lack any appeal. And the only interesting parts of this episode are that the Glove World president was cryogenically frozen to reference Walt Disney, and that they named him after Hieronymus Bosch, the painter who made the Garden of Earthly Delights. These two cultural references aside, I found myself bored almost the entire time other than an occasional decent line, and felt annoyed the whole episode was just a low-stakes chase pursuing a robot kid that does nothing but laugh. If the gag got you to laugh once, they were really banking on it, doing it 28 more times. I don't have much else to say about this one and would rather talk about more interesting specials. This one also goes in F tier. The Clash of Triton. This one is quite possibly the special with the worst reputation. So when rewatching it, I was trying my best to find some hidden strengths. I really couldn't find anything. The episode opens with Neptune celebrating his 5,000th birthday, but feeling depressed that his son Triton and him had a fallout. It's worth mentioning that this is actually the first time we get to see Triton and that he never comes back. I wonder what that would imply about the quality of this episode. As you probably could have guessed, Triton isn't really that interesting of a character and is basically just a hippie stereotype that was already outdated when the episode released back in 2010. This episode just approached him in a really weird way. He literally cures cancer and all other diseases in the second scene with him in it. And then Neptune gets mad and banishes him to a cage for 10,000 years, and you're just kind of left there scratching your head, wondering why they would do that. Neptune is normally a fun character, but here he just cries the whole time. And the fact that this special uses the first 11 minutes just to set up this basic plot means that it's kind of boring. But then the second half isn't any good either. The entire thing was just humorless filler, and is one of those rare specials that truly lacks any appeal whatsoever. Then it all just abruptly finishes with Triton destroying Bikini Bottom and Neptune being happy about it, re-embracing him. literally just a slapped-on happy ending. The little bit of humor that was attempted fell completely flat, and the episode was the opposite of emotionally resonating, earning it a spot in Davy Jones' locker, aka F tier. It came from Goo Lagoon. Almost all of the low-tier specials on this list suffer from pacing issues, and this episode seems no different. The episode decides to hook us strongly right from the get-go by giving us 30 seconds of SpongeBob and Patrick running back and forth from the beach, really giving me the impression this episode is gonna capitalize on every moment of the extended runtime. I'm being sarcastic, of course. Yeah, the pacing in this one sucks. There's no surprise that this whole thing is an adventure-based episode with not nearly enough going on. Super bubbles are coming from Goo Lagoon. They appear harmless, but Sandy says they're dangerous. And that's all that happens in the first 11 minutes. The next 11 minutes also has not much going on since everyone's just running away from these bubbles. Eventually, Plankton decides to blackmail Mr. Krabs to give him the formula or he'll pop this giant bubble. Mr. Krabs gives in and Plankton pops the bubble anyway, but the formula was a fake anyways, so nothing actually mattered. If this episode was funny, all of this would be fine, but considering it's not, I don't think this thing can go any higher than bottom of D tier. It blew it! SpongeBob's Last Stand. When I tell you this is the best episode in the series, I am lying through my teeth. It kinda just exists. It's unfunny, it's preachy, and it feels oddly hollow despite the main focus of the episode being on environmentalism. Also, even the art feels annoying from the very beginning. The guard has multiple chins and an irritable demeanor. SpongeBob and Patrick are overly produced feeling, and again, the word soulless quickly comes to the tongue. Also, the song. Absolutely terrible sounding and just repeating the word jellyfish over and over. You know the song is way too simple when the happy birthday song feels complex by comparison. If they didn't repeat the dang thing so many times, I'd almost just assume it got added last second in post-production, but nope. This special is bad even by Season 7 standards, and most qualities you hope to see in a SpongeBob special are weak if even present here. But look, let's find some strengths right fast, okay? There are a couple of legitimately funny moments, like Plankton saying he's been stealing Mr. Krabs' mail for the past 5 years. I thought that was pretty good. Or the clip showing Krabs raise his hand to support the highway. That was pretty funny. But this is undercut by outdated cultural references, a runtime that in no way needed extending, and an obnoxiously preachy vibe that didn't even send a fully concrete message. Even the resolution felt so cheesy and on the nose.
Wait! I didn't count on all of you working together!
This episode feels empty and I dislike it. If it wasn't for a couple of legitimately funny moments, it would belong in F tier. However, a spade's a spade, so it barely squeaks into low D tier. Yay! Next one. SpongeBob, You're Fired. One of the final specials I consider middle-era SpongeBob, coming out in the first half of Season 9. This one doesn't give us much to talk about since it lacks originality, but basically, the episode is about SpongeBob getting fired so Mr. Krabs can save a nickel. Super original. But anyways, after getting fired, SpongeBob gets depressed, so Patrick shows him the benefits of being fun employed. After that, he goes and tries to get employed by various food mascots before finally getting rehired in the end. It's got a bit of charm, sure, but the plotline is too predictable and it's often unfunny, so it's not one I would recommend watching. SpongeBob, You're Fired places D tier. The Legend of Bikini Bottom is a Halloween claymation special. I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for putting it so low, cause a lot of people really like these. The reason it ranks on the lower end is because the story and humor are quite weak. I like cool visuals just as much as the next guy, even if claymation isn't normally my thing. But I don't think there's enough substance here to warrant the 23-minute runtime. Plot-wise, Patrick tells SpongeBob that scary equals funny to help him get over his fears. And then the entire episode is SpongeBob just not getting scared by usual Halloween antics until he does. My favorite part of this special is the funny moment when they made the Krusty Krab a haunted house showcasing the horrors of the Chum Bucket. And then across the street, the Chum Bucket became a haunted house showcasing the horrors of the Krusty Krab. But outside of that, it wasn't all that funny. There was a giant nude SpongeBob. Yeah, not gonna lie, this special is toast. It's weirdly unable to be rewatched as well, since so much of it is just banking on you liking the art style. In fact, I found when I rewatched it to see if there are any qualities I missed initially that the cracks began to show even more. Because the novelty of claymation can only carry an episode so far, and because it lacks the plot and humor I really like to see, I kept subconsciously just kind of wishing it would be over. Despite a lot of y'all probably putting this one much higher, I honestly think it belongs in upper D tier when viewing it as a cohesive package. Swamp Mates has some fun stuff going on with it, since it has a little hero action in there and even got the chief to show up. But then the intro ends and it becomes Patrick and Bubble Bass slapstick for the next 10 minutes. I honestly really wish they would have just sticked with the style of the intro the whole way through, because it would have been a lot more entertaining to me personally. As it stands though, it's very meh. Maybe if the episode depicted butts less constantly, I'd find it funnier. But overall, this one feels a little lazy to me and like it shouldn't even be a special. It may be a bit more charming than you'd expect, but that hardly matters when it ultimately is pretty forgettable. D tier seems fine. SpongeBob vs. the Big One is a Season 6 special where SpongeBob and the gang get stuck on an island with a hippie surfer voiced by Johnny Depp named Jack Kahuna Laguna, or JKL for short. There are a couple great moments in it, like the peaceful river traveling scene, the long surfboard, and Davy Jones himself having a cameo. And there's generally some good artwork too. But even so, this one is still considered mediocre by most fans, and it's largely because nearly half the episode's runtime is spent on unfunny training gags. If it were a brief montage or something, I think it could have worked, but 9 minutes of it was just crazy padding. Also, story-wise, the episode keeps undercutting itself, like when JKL says all the training was pointless, or when the Big One consumes JKL as a sacrifice, only for him to show up on the beach a little later. It sliced the tension of everything going on like a knife, and gave the episode a very pointless and forgettable vibe to it, despite having some good jokes and visuals. This one is a hair underrated considering those qualities, but I definitely think it's still not nearly as good as the specials down the list. It's our king of D tier. Sandy's County Christmas, another one of them claymation Christmas specials. When I went to review this episode, I immediately got super distracted by the fact that this French cowboy diver castaway guy is playing the guitar with very thick gloves. Like, I don't know if any of you guys play the guitar, but with very thick gloves, I kinda just assume you'd end up muting the strings. I even tested it and concluded, yeah, it's impossible even if you're just strumming chords. This episode defenestrates logic and is dumb. This concludes the Manly Clownfish review of Sandy's County Christmas. Nah, I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. This episode is actually pretty solid. Even though, like I said earlier, I'm not that big of a claymation kind of guy. SpongeBob always does claymation really well. And despite disliking the Sandy movie, her family in this one isn't half bad to have on screen either. Plot-wise, this one is essentially that classic holiday plot where a group knocks out Santa and then has to take his place. They frame it like Sandy or her family are to blame for this, but honestly, in my opinion, it looks like it's Santa's own fault for getting knocked out. I mean, he clearly had plenty of warning before running into this tree.
Mayday, they've hit the second tree.
It was pretty funny how afterwards everyone was more concerned about the fact they weren't going to get presents instead of the fact that Santa just acquired brain damage. As for the strengths of this special, charm and music are probably the two strongest contenders. Charm-wise, the episode does well and nails the Christmas vibe. And song-wise, the songs are pretty 50-50 between either being repetitive and annoying or actually quite punchy and fun. Sandy's County Christmas is better than I expected, but it's also probably the weakest of the 4 Christmas specials. Like Legend of Bikini Bottom, its main appeal is the claymation, and like I said with it, good graphics are good, but not substantial enough to warrant a high ranking. Overall, low C tier seems to suit it pretty good. Squidferatu might be the perfect example of a special that nails certain elements, but flops hard on others. Let's start with the strengths. Art-wise, this special went in a unique direction and greatly succeeded in making an original spin on Halloween atmospheres. Using so many real images like this felt unique to this episode and helped it stand out visually from other SpongeBob specials. Plus, SpongeBob and Squidward have genuinely good chemistry throughout the episode, so that adds to the charm. As far as weaknesses go, I'll be honest, I find Slappy so freaking obnoxious. I really don't like it anytime he's on screen because he speaks super slow and nasally. Pair this with a predictable plot and you got an episode that's visually distinct but still unmemorable and a bit obnoxious. Low C tier works well. Oh boy. Grab your torch and pitchforks! Because I don't think that Best Day Ever is that good of a SpongeBob special. Sure, it might be one of the most famous SpongeBob specials, but I don't think it really deserves the fame it has. Structurally, it feels overly formulaic. SpongeBob goes up to one friend, helps them, gets bummed out, and then repeats this for the rest of the episode other than the opening and final few minutes. I find myself bored with it plot-wise, and it doesn't help that there aren't many jokes that land. Also, we need to talk about the song. Look, I appreciate the fact that it showed up as the 4th outro credit song in the original SpongeBob movie 2 entire years earlier, but the song itself is far from the best in the series. I know. Music is subjective. But as a guy who likes most SpongeBob music, I wish they would have picked a stronger song to base this special around. My favorite thing about this episode is how it embraces a very optimistic spirit, which is really cool and all that, but SpongeBob does that pretty often anyways, so this one doesn't stand out a ton for me. Overall, this one belongs in C tier to me. Let me know what your thoughts are on this one, because I imagine it's gonna have a broader range of opinion than most other specials. Handemonium. This is a season 12 one with a perfectly absurd premise for a SpongeBob episode. The Chum Bucket Glove starts terrorizing the town and Hans has to take it on. Straight out the gate, this one earns some manliness points with a fun arm wrestling scene. And even though this one is a little gimmicky, I find it fun and memorable. It's action-oriented and gets pretty creative with its approach. Ultimately, I find this one about as entertaining as a mid-tier wrestling match. Something kind of fun, but nothing crazy and probably not something you'd rush to rewatch. Overall, though there's definitely some charm with this one, it lacks the polish, emotional stakes, or consistent laugh density to push it too high. I think it does pretty good at what it wants to, but is limited by its scope. Handemonium is a cozy one that feels fine in C tier, but if you love the glove, I wouldn't blame you for ranking it higher. Krusty Koncessionaires, another Season 12 special. I'm beginning to realize Season 12 had a ton of these 15-minute specials paired with a 7-minute shorter episode. Anyways, Krusty Koncessionaires is one of those specials that feels very Season 12 in both the best and worst ways. The premise is simple. SpongeBob, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs sell some food at a stadium. Most of this episode is situational humor that stems from its premise with varying quality. I liked the Squidward fantasy scene and thought it was pretty funny when he laid all the work on SpongeBob. But like most of the other Season 12 specials, this one limits its scope a bit too much to be appealing to me. If the dialogue were wittier or if there was more nuance to the characters, I'd be a fan. But as it stands, it feels fast yet hollow. C tier suits it well. Snow Yellow and the Seven Jellies is a retelling of the classic Snow White story that did a good job translating into a SpongeBob version. I thought that making Karen the evil queen and having her jealousy towards SpongeBob being based on who the squarest in the land was a funny idea. Very clever. There are a few fun gags in there as well, like when SpongeBob ate the poison chum apple thing and turned into a live-action sponge. Or later on, how it felt so cinematic and memorable when Karen was falling apart after being attacked by a bunch of screwdrivers. This one feels like a special through and through, with great voice performances by the cast and charm throughout. I found the art endearing here, since it was goofy without trying too hard. The biggest thing holding this special back, though, has gotta be its predictability. Because it's a retelling of a famous story, it's quite challenging to make it feel fresh without losing the source material's vibe. I appreciate the small ways they make this accommodate SpongeBob's world, but overall I couldn't help but feel the episode was dragging since I already knew what was gonna happen and when. This makes it paradoxically well executed, yet uninteresting. So it lands in the middle of the road at C tier. SpongeBob's Road to Christmas. In total, there have been 4 Christmas specials produced, and this is the 3rd one releasing in Season 13. I think it's a pretty solid time. Plankton, SpongeBob, and Patrick all head to the North Pole to see Santa, but they end up going to Encino, California to this Christmas festival thingamajig instead. It doesn't really feel super Christmassy per se, but they put a fresh spin on a bunch of Christmas-themed stuff that felt really creative. I love how they made the reindeer jacked Gigadeer, cause 'tis the season for lots of bulking. Manliness points are earned here for sure, cause inspiring the young folk to hit the gym is the holiday message we needed all along. The scene was funny in an unhinged sort of way, and later on felt complimented by the elves' drinking party where they got all violent after downing too much of the old nog. Finally, the greatest thing is that Santa is nowhere to be seen this whole time because he's apparently just chilling in Aruba with the missus. This episode is a mood, I swear. As for weak points, I would say I kinda just presented every strength the special has just now. So outside of those things I said, it feels a little on the slow side. The only really noteworthy thing is how we got a cartoon version of Patchy the Pirate randomly, but he feels oddly tired and mature compared to how he usually is, so it doesn't really feel like Patchy. Tom Kenny's live-action performance is impossible to beat. What a legend. Anyways, this one places C tier. SpongeBob and Patrick's Timeline Twist Up. This is the first episode of season 16, and Nickelodeon clearly wanted it to feel like a big deal. The premise is that SpongeBob and Patrick mess with time, sending them back through some of the most iconic season 1 episodes, all while doubling as a crossover with the Patrick Star Show. I liked this episode a lot more than I expected. The biggest strength of this special is that it doesn't copy the old episodes beat for beat. Instead, it uses them as a launch pad before veering into weirder, more unpredictable directions. The standout example of what I'm talking about comes from the Help Wanted portion, where everything starts off familiar, but quickly spirals into a dystopian future where Grandpat takes over Bikini Bottom using Plankton's plan. Watching his empire grow was both visually grand and narratively engaging. For such a brief stretch in the special, it felt surprisingly ambitious, and easily stands as the high point of the whole thing. Beyond Help Wanted, the other 3 classic episodes they visited were Ripped Pants, Rock Bottom, and Neptune's Spatula. As for these, they're much more meh than the Help Wanted portion, because the Help Wanted portion was just really good. But that said, the Ripped Pants one had a really funny scene with Cecil when he got ripped. It was hilarious, and it felt like it was straight out of Amazing World of Gumball in its prime or something. You already know it earned enough manliness points to knock it up a notch in the overall ranking too. But the Rock Bottom and Neptune's Spatula sections drag hard by comparison, unfortunately. Rock Bottom sucks because it's just Squidina getting into squidnanigans, and Neptune's Spatula features Patrick's mom going on and on about cleaning and cooking. This part in particular is tough to watch because for some reason, Patrick's mom has a voice that makes Marge Simpson sound like an angel. It's intentionally quite annoying and achieves its goal of being annoying. I really don't know why they would have written such a freaking annoying character. Why does both Patrick and Sandy have such obnoxious relatives? Okay, so bad characters acknowledged, let's talk visuals. In general, I think the artists deserve some credit for making something really fun. They nailed a happy middle ground between the classic color palettes of season 1 and the polished crispness of modern SpongeBob. It gives the episode a nostalgic but modern aesthetic that really works. So you got a couple great scenes in there and some really good art. But unfortunately, it does lean a little bit heavily on the nostalgia for its main hook. It ends up feeling a little like the Patrick Star Show more often than I wish it would as well. Given the amount of substance this episode has, you'd think it'd be about 16 minutes or so, maybe 22 if it's stretched. But 44 minutes? 44 freaking minutes? There's no way anyone genuinely wished it would keep going that long. When I wasn't even halfway through, I found myself already checking how much time was left since it just started to drag. So many specials on this list would benefit from trimming the runtime down to 22 minutes or even less than that, and just focusing on the genuinely interesting portions. As it stands, even though we do got a couple scenes in there that feel genuinely inspired and original, there's a lot of it that also feels like retread or filler, so it makes Timeline Twist Up a bit of a mixed bag when it really didn't have to be. It's better than I expected, thanks to its willingness to take risks and a few genuinely memorable sequences, but it still relies too much on nostalgia to carry its bloated runtime. I wouldn't call it bad, I wouldn't call it great. I would just say that it's ambitious and missed the mark a little more often than not. For me, this one sits comfortably in C tier. A lot of the mediocre SpongeBob specials end up forgotten under the sands of time. But for Truth or Square, it ended up becoming more infamous than forgotten. And I think a big part of that comes down to how it was positioned. It was meant to be the 10th anniversary celebration of the show, a huge milestone, and Nickelodeon really hyped it up. They even gave it a 58-minute runtime, which sounds like the perfect way to honor a decade of SpongeBob, but in execution it just doesn't live up to the promise. Issue is, half the special is Patchy just running around with celebrities, and while some of the moments are a little funny, they tend to drag on way too long. The other half is split between SpongeBob and the gang being stuck in the Krusty Krab vents, and a bunch of flashbacks that aren't even real clips. None of these 3 different perspectives really develop into a compelling storyline, and when I watch it, I'm left constantly waiting for something to happen. Those weaknesses acknowledged, I don't think Truth or Square is all bad, and it's even a little underrated, I dare say. The music has got to be one of its biggest strengths. A day like this, and We've Got Scurvy are genuinely fun and catchy. Some of the live action works well too, like when we see Squidward's voice actor Roger Bumpass play a security guard, or when Patchy the Pirate kidnapped Robin Williams for a tour of Nick's studios. The animated portion had its own share of memorable gags as well, like SpongeBob and Sandy's fake wedding, or the alternative intro songs. Plus, the art style keeps on shifting styles enough to keep the visuals from ever becoming stale. But fundamentally, when you compare Truth or Square to something like Big Birthday Blowout, the flaws become way too apparent. Big Birthday Blowout used its extended runtime in a way that feels truly celebratory, using all of the main voice actors in live-action roleplay, giving the characters better lines, and not spinning the whole special an event for crying out loud. Meanwhile, Truth or Square comes across more like a clip show, stuffed to the brim with filler and celebrity cameos. It feels like less of a tribute to SpongeBob and more of a missed opportunity. In the end, the special does have its fun moments that are worth seeing, but the overwhelming amount of padding really drags it down. Upper C tier is the most fair placement. It's not as unwatchable as many claim, but it's nowhere near the anniversary special SpongeBob deserved. Ghoul Fools is largely forgotten, but whenever it's brought up, it gets a little overhated on if you ask me. Like most disliked SpongeBob specials, the two main reasons usually boil down to pacing or weak humor. But I think this one is a bit misunderstood. Its main appeal is the adventure of the episode, and it does a solid job at making it feel bigger than usual since it gives us a new environment, a cool chase scene with the Flying Dutchman, and a ghost pirate with a distinct personality named, hold up. Lord Poltergeist. I like how Lord Poltergeist is pretty reasonable overall as far as ghost pirate captains go, letting SpongeBob and Patrick go after breaking and entering, so long as they return a piece he needs for the ship's engine. And the conflict introduced by having Krabs go back with them to try and steal his doubloons was fun, since they ended up having to work together to avoid the Flying Dutchman since Lord Poltergeist stole the treasure from him to begin with. The episode ending with the Dutchman just winning felt appropriate as well. Overall, this episode isn't going to make you laugh all that much, but as far as adventure episodes go, it's decent enough. Low B tier. The Sponge Who Can Fly, aka The Lost Episode, is a weird special to rank. On one hand, it has a few funny moments that get referenced even to this day. On the other, it's the first special to feel shamelessly like it's got obvious padding. Talking about how it's a weird one to rank, the bizarre thing is, even though the patchy parts feel like the filler, they're significantly stronger than the main episode. The main episode itself has a mediocre song, a mediocre plot, and mediocre humor on the whole. There's a small handful of moments that land well in the animated portion, but it ain't much. And again with the weirdness of this one, the whole lost episode shtick feels so gimmicky and unearned, since this one feels less unique than most normal SpongeBob episodes. If you ask me, if it wasn't for the patchy segments, it would literally be the worst Season 3 episode without any real competition. But hey, the patchy parts are validly considered part of the special, to be fair, and they're quite well written actually. So you survived this time, Sponge Who Could Fly, aka Lost Episode, because one of the funniest patchy scenes in general happens here. His crash out, where he runs away and gets rid of all his SpongeBob stuff.
All of it! All of it!
All of it! Also guys, while we were watching this, I noticed he has a bar of soap on his hook during the shower scene. This show is so freaking funny and I love making videos on it. Sponge Who Could Fly places low B tier. Pest of the West is a full-on spaghetti western where SpongeBob's ancestor SpongeBuck saves Bikini Gulch. And tonally, it very much delivered. The town design, the costumes, the background music, heck, even the color palette really leans into that Western vibe. There's a clear effort to give this special its own identity, separate from the usual Bikini Bottom settings, and it works wonderfully. Character-wise, SpongeBuck feels like Forrest Gump with his wide-eyed optimism, obliviousness, and slower speech rhythm. Plankton feels reasonably intimidating and fits the character of Deadeye very well, and the rest of the cast slots seamlessly into the Western world with enough charm to keep things lively. Musically, the background saloon tunes are solid and fit the vibe perfectly, but unfortunately, the two songs that took center stage here were both weak lyrically and melodically. Finally, even though the plot was pretty predictable, it had a few funny moments to it, like when SpongeBob defeated Plankton unintentionally by stepping on him. I didn't see it coming, and since the episode did well at building up tension for their standoff, it got a laugh out of me for sure. This one feels like one of those specials that has good bones, but an execution that falls a little shy of the mark in too many key categories. For the plot, a twist or something would have really elevated it. Song-wise, yeah, unfortunately the two main ones both kind of fall flat, and humor-wise, there's actually a decent number of legit chuckles in there, but there's a reason you don't ever hear this one get quoted, since none of them go beyond kinda funny, and they feel a little dumbed down. Overall, Pest of the West has decent pacing, middle-of-the-road humor, and a fun Western vibe. but mediocre songs and plot depth keep it from reaching its full potential. Low B tier feels just right for it. Gooning on the Moon. I misjudged this episode. Because I often find Squidina annoying, I never really gave this one a proper chance until researching for the video. But mate, it's more fun than I remembered. It's ambitious, occasionally funny, and it definitely feels bigger than a lot of the other specials here do. This one may not be first in line on my rewatch list, but Squidward has several great moments, and that spaceship design was really creative. I like how the adventure kept taking turns as far as what the threat the cast is facing, and parts like the radiation blanket protection bit felt fresh. The only two major weaknesses with this episode is that the characters feel a little weak, and that in the final act, they lost a lot of the fun momentum they built up earlier. That said, this one legit has some creativity and novelty to it, so low B tier works well for it. Squirrel Jelly is a fun episode since it's basically just Sandy trying to make a hard mode for jellyfishing. I thought it was relatable the way she unintentionally ruined the game in the process of trying to make it harder. Like when you play a video game with a friend or something and you want to go on the hardest difficulty, but they want to go on the easiest. Also, I don't know why, but I never realized Sandy was so savage here. She goes crazy aggressive and literally wants to mount the jellyfish on her wall. And also, the way she made jellyfishing more challenging was by giving them something that was like steroids for some reason. Wild stuff. And I like the ending too, since it had Sandy learn to enjoy easier things. Plot-wise, this episode is really solid. The dialogue doesn't tend to be particularly memorable though, so I kind of find I forget what happens right after it happens. And then sometimes the extended runtime gets wasted on gags that just drag on and on without being funny. I'm gonna place this one in low B tier since its qualities range from A tier to D tier. Dopey Dick is an underrated special that flew under the radar for many fans since it came out in the later portion of Season 13. It scratches a similar itch that Snow Yellow does since it's a SpongeBob parody of a famous story. But I enjoy this one more since the story it's based on hasn't been overdone quite as much as Snow White has. And a proper pirate setting makes this one a fun time to watch. The pacing is good, the humor is decent, and the art direction, mate, I really think it's something special. The gray color palette sets the tone as being a bit more ominous, and the character designs couldn't have been done better. Obviously, because it's a parody, it can feel a little predictable plot-wise if you already know the original story of Moby Dick, but I personally enjoyed it for the art alone if not anything else. If the dialogue were a little bit stronger, it would go down as an all-time classic, but even in its current state, it's one of the strongest Season 13 episodes. S-tier name, B-tier episode. I got some serious beef with this special just from the name alone. Season 7's The Great Patty Caper. Apparently, the name's so nice they used it twice, cause Season 6 also has an episode called Patty Caper. This is a mystery episode that, while fun, misses the mark as a mystery in itself due to its predictability. While I appreciate the train setting and homage to mystery novels, the mystery aspect feels weak since there aren't any meaningful or surprising twists. So this one ultimately is completely reliant on the interest in the setting. It really shouldn't have even been a special since the main conflict switched 2/3 of the way through. It suddenly just became about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to stop the train from crashing. This really implies they didn't need the extended runtime because the main appeal was finding out who stole the formula, not seeing if they could stop the train from crashing. The reason this one ranks so high is that despite the mystery itself not being that great, it has a lot of charm. The characters they introduced are a fun time, and it was pretty funny how SpongeBob kept on uncovering the fact that they're criminals just for unrelated crimes. Overall, I like this one, but it's not referenced often for a reason. The charm is high enough to be considered likable, but the substance is low enough to not be considered memorable. This one belongs in low B tier. Alright, next up we got Kreepaway Kamp. Right off the bat, this episode hits you with some pretty unique visuals. We've got a new location, a darker aesthetic than usual, and even a nifty first-person perspective from some mysterious new character at the intro. The vibe screams classic horror movie, but with SpongeBob. Plot-wise, all the main characters head over to Camp Coral, and the whole time, they just get picked off one by one. It's fun, it's a little spooky, and it leans into parody without taking itself too seriously. I love the bubble bath shower scene, even though I never thought I'd say that. And there's a sprinkling of random adult jokes in there that catch you off guard in a good way. Also, the twist at the end with who the stalker was the whole time was a great nod to the 15 Camp Coral fans out there. All those strengths acknowledged, and I bet you can already guess what I'm about to say. The premise certainly isn't strong enough to justify 44 minutes of runtime. It's basically just, oh no, now the stranger got Mrs. Puff. 2 minutes go by, and then, oh no, now the stranger got Squidward, and then another 2 minutes go by. Oh no, the stranger got 3 random fish. Stretch that out for half an hour, and there's your middle act for this special. They throw out the magic rule of 3 in favor of repeating this endlessly, and it kills any tension you could theoretically get since it gives the special an overly predictable feeling to it. If you told me you liked it, I would understand, since it kind of feels like a C-tier Scooby-Doo movie, but with SpongeBob characters. At the end of the day, though, it just needed some more variety to hold interest. While it's definitely one of the best Season 14 episodes, I just don't find myself wanting to rewatch it. In the context of Season 14, this episode feels amazing. But in context of the whole show or media in general, it feels like something you might throw on in the background when you're doing something else and not pay too much attention to. I like the parody charm of this one, but dislike the rinse and repeat style, making it fit in nicely in B tier. It's a SpongeBob Christmas. The intro immediately does a good job of getting you into the Christmas spirit by giving Hans a Santa glove, my community college roommate Realistic Fishhead a hat, and Patrick a brief but charming song about his plans to capture Santa. To me, of the 4 Christmas specials, this one takes second place. The characters have great songs, and I particularly like the one that Sandy sang. Also, the anti-fruitcake propaganda is still going strong in SpongeBob Christmas specials, it seems. And when Plankton fused the fruitcakes with Jerktonium to make himself the nicest one in Bikini Bottom by comparison, it felt like a fun fusion of SpongeBob, Christmas, and classical villainy. Whether you like claymation or not, there's no denying this episode has all the trimmings of a classic Christmas special. I think it's cool how when everyone went all jerky, they added some footage of the North Dakota riots to vary the visuals. And on a side note, Rock Bottom getting referenced made me happy. The pacing felt decently tight plot-wise, like a caffeinated penguin sliding down a hill, narrowly dodging trees along the way. My only major gripe was that jokes weren't made very often, even though the few that occurred were actually pretty strong. Also, the patchy portions were weak and felt like filler. Overall, this is a tough one to rank, but I think middle B tier makes the most sense given its mix of strengths and weaknesses. Friend or Foe was a special Nick pushed to the moon back in the day. And in retrospect, there were a lot of other specials that released in Season 5 as well. I think that the climate at the time made Nick feel pressure to try and vary things to maintain post-movie interest. If I had to pick one word to define how this special was unique though, I would say lore. The whole premise of this special was a shock at the time of its release. That Krabs and Plankton were once buddies. We do see glimpses of this elsewhere in the show prior to this though, so even though it was surprising, it felt like a natural extension of the canon, and honestly, it worked really well as a change. As for how the episode itself plays out, it starts off with a brief but funny Patchy segment where he's flipping burgers in a kitchen that funnily enough has the same layout as the Krusty Krab. Mate, I got a question. How is this E for everyone? I can't tell if they're showing alcohol here or not. Anyways, once the animated portion begins, it immediately gives us one of the best action scenes in all of SpongeBob, with S-tier visuals and audio clearly setting a great tone right from the beginning. If it just came down to the lore and the intro, this episode would easily be an S-tier special. But this one sits in the middle of the tier list for a reason. The trouble is, after this S-tier opening, most of the episode is just about Mr. Krabs and Plankton as kids. Which, you know, sounds cool lore-wise, particularly with seeing Mr. Krabs' background and poverty and all, but otherwise it's kind of boring. Why does it have to predominantly take place in a school and a gross restaurant? Why is the owner of the restaurant also a pimp, apparently? Also, why is the dialogue noticeably less polished in the middle act compared to the intro? Man, this one also gets stamped with the jahanki of missed opportunity. The dialogue neither moves the plot needle or feels funny, just kinda is. And then the final act just tells the same story from 3 different perspectives with minimal change to each one. Riveting stuff. This one's weird. The premise for the episode being a backstory for Krabs and Plankton is really solid on paper and appropriate for the 22-minute runtime. But the execution made it feel like the extra 11 minutes were all filler. It's an awkward blend of S-tier lore, A-tier patchy segments, and then D-tier meandering moments. Friend or Foe lands in middle B tier. Good, but not great. Whatever happened to SpongeBob? Hey, 2 Season 5 specials back to back. This one's a special where SpongeBob loses his memory, runs away from Bikini Bottom, and stumbles into the identity of Mayor Cheesehead Brown Pants in New Kelp City. It's got some laughs here and there, and one of the more unique premises in the series. I like how he defeats a group of bad dudes terrorizing the town and becomes the mayor unintentionally. And I thought SpongeBob having amnesia shook up the episode in an entertaining way since they played it both for comedy and drama. Comedy-wise, it's pretty 50-50 overall. Some gags land well, and others feel a little dragged out or weak. Tone-wise, this one flips between goofy and sad, but unlike that one episode where Gary goes missing, it doesn't really emotionally connect as much, so it feels a bit melodramatic. Still though, what does work is the idea. Seeing SpongeBob removed from Bikini Bottom and having to act as a mayor in a new city gives the episode a fresh energy with a new environment and new character dynamics. It's entertaining and is a fun episode that often gets overlooked, I think. Overall, I'd slot Whatever Happened to SpongeBob into upper B tier. A flawed but interesting experiment special that gave us Mayor Cheesehead. Goodbye Krabby Patty. This one is all about the Krabby Patty being replaced with the Big Business Freezer version. Sure, it's a reused plot, but despite this, it's actually pretty good. I appreciated the world expansion and liked the new characters they introduced. The plot is at the forefront of this special, with each scene progressing the story very well. Krabs turns the Krusty Krab into a museum after switching to frozen patties. And by the second half of the episode, Patrick, the new face of the Krabby Patty, becomes super rich and begins to keep a bunch of posh company. This all falls apart though when people start getting sick after eating the frozen Krabby Patties, causing the Krusty Krab to go back to its original style. Admittedly, these plot points sound a lot like a bunch of other SpongeBob episodes Frankenstein together, specifically Selling Out, SpongeBob You're Fired, Porous Pockets, and Krusty Dogs, but it's actually surprisingly fun since the pacing stayed strong throughout. The resolution with how Mr. Krabs slowly adding filler to the patties ultimately caused the new frozen empire to start falling felt satisfying, even if a bit ironic. The only thing really keeping this episode from a higher tier status is the weaker humor and predictability. Goodbye Krabby Patty places in high B tier. Back to the Past somewhat challenges the definition of a special, but with an extended runtime and the great Adam West himself, R.I.P., voicing young Mermaid Man, I believe it qualifies. First off, I love the way they use time travel in this episode. Seeing a dystopian version of Bikini Bottom where Man-Ray is the ruler felt creative and fresh, and having the old Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy legitimately pass on was a bold move for just a throwaway gag. And then the ending. Finishing off with the timeline and chaos and thousands of SpongeBob clones was fun and goofy. The episode really knew when to act serious and when to brush logic aside, if you ask me. All that said, sure, it's not exactly #1 contender for best dialogue in the series, so I really think a repass on the script would have beefed this one up a hair more. But as it stands, it's a solid upper B tier special. Easy to enjoy, but not quite at the peak of our list. Partay Pooper Pants. My favorite thing about this special has gotta be the patchy segments. They're just hilarious, giving us both quotable jokes and a goofy little song. Meanwhile, the SpongeBob sections add surprising character depth. We get to see a more stressed out, anxious side of SpongeBob, while Patrick steps up as a genuinely supportive friend. It's a combo we don't see all that often, and it really works. The whole thing just reeks of charm and has a unique little style to it, and Patrick is at his peak. Now, I'll admit, it is a pretty tame special. It mainly feels special because of the extra runtime and the patchy segments, rather than because of what happens in the actual story. But personally, I really enjoy it. The comedy lands consistently, we get some emotional resonance here and there, and overall it just makes for a cozy, rewatchable experience. I actually already made a full video diving deeper into why I think this episode is the most underrated classic era episode. So if you want the full breakdown, go check that out. But yeah, Party Pooper Pants deserves way more love than it gets. It's our king of B tier. Frozen Face-Off. Kinda like Ghoul Fools, this one's another adventure-style special that often gets overlooked. But personally, I think it has more appeal than just the adventure, since it also has a handful of genuinely funny moments.
Atom by atom!
Y'all, there's a reason we gave this one the Season 8 Best Episode Award. It's a fun time and quite rewatchable. I really enjoyed seeing all the Bikini Bottomites compete for a pile of money in the snow, and the episode uses its icy setting well, turning the cold into a fun source of challenge and creative gags. They managed to make the threat of freezing legitimately a major concern for the crew, and the whole barely surviving vibe gave this one some grit. My only real personal hang-up is the claymation monster, which does add to the charm of the episode, but felt kinda cheap since apparently all it takes to defeat one of these things is a little bag of gummy worms. It kinda reminds me of Dumped, since the monster just wanted the gummy worms the whole time. Stupid, but hey, doesn't ruin the fun of the adventure and adds another thread in the icy wasteland, so narratively it at least does a good job. With its strong action, creative setting, and some memorable humor, this episode lands in low A tier. Solid and entertaining, but sharper writing and pacing would have really elevated it. Feral Friends. This one is stressful. It's an action-packed shuffle to save the main cast from eating each other. What happens is there's a special moon that causes all the sea creatures in Bikini Bottom to become their real-life, non-anthropomorphic counterparts, void of their usual personality and consciousness. Seeing them fight and try to eat each other is fascinating, and you can really tell this came out shortly after our favorite marine biologist, Steven Hillenberg, rejoined the show again. It's up to Sandy to save the day, since she's the only one who doesn't transform since she's from the land. And the action of seeing her scramble to keep her friends alive is genuinely tense. The boss battle at the end with the giant Squidward octopus is crazy. Not only is it fast-paced action, since the giant octopus Squidward broke into Sandy's tree dome, but it's super stressful watching him try and reach the other fish to eat them. This special doesn't even need to be funny because of how good the action is. And yet, we still got a couple funny moments in there anyways. Making the characters their real-life marine forms was super creative, and the episode succeeds greatly with what it set out to do. Sure, the patchy moments kinda drag, but who really cares? It's a flawed but great special. Easy A-tier pick. Ugh. A more divisive special that falls into the you either love it or hate it camp. And personally, it's one of my favorites. Every corner of this special feels interesting. I like how the dialogue is unintelligible, and yet you understand what they're saying. I like the recharacterization of the main cast to match the setting. I like how the excitement SpongeGar showed when he discovered fire felt completely genuine. And even beyond the general charm of the setting, the humor does well too. My favorite part of the whole thing is when it cuts to present-day SpongeBob when Patchy and Potty are arguing. As for the rest of the episode, there's a beauty to the simplicity and slow pacing. A lot of times when SpongeBob specials get slow, it's because they struggle to fill the runtime. But here, it feels a lot more intentional. It's very suitable for the setting. The only way it's really a negative is that there's probably one too many wait so long it becomes funny gags. Even though they're genuinely funny, the same formula getting used over and over again makes me think that a little more variety in the comedy would have kept things feeling Ziploc fresh. Finally, the song When Worlds Collide is super underrated. I kinda forgot about it until rewatching this thing, but it was really fun. Overall, there's a reason they revisited this special in the Cosmic Shake. While the spaced out jokes hold it back from being considered truly elite, I still think it earns a solid spot in middle A tier. I'm really curious about what you guys think of this one as well. Hello Bikini Bottom is one of the more ambitious SpongeBob specials with both heart and a large scale. For any great musical though, one of the most important things to nail has gotta be the songs. And luckily here, they consistently slap. It helps the pacing too, because the plot is often pushed forward via the song, so it doesn't ever really drag too hard. I like the characters they introduced in this special, and there's a few good emotional beats between SpongeBob and Squidward. I was actually a little surprised at how much character development this special did with them, making them feel like they developed a unique sense of friendship by the end of it. Humor-wise, the episode is pretty hit or miss, but it didn't aim to appeal via humor as much, so that's not a major issue. The fact is, Hello Bikini Bottom is just fun to watch. The heart of the episode and some good music places Hello Bikini Bottom in a very respectable A-tier position. Atlantis SquarePantis gets hated on all the time. Personally, I think that's crazy, and I'm about to explain why. This special is an underrated gem that does have its issues, but doesn't get nearly enough respect considering it has good songs, funny moments, and a Willy Wonka parody-style plot. Plus, there's a whole new environment. The Atlantis setting itself is visually rich and enticing. It truly feels like an elite area between the diverse scientific research, advanced and distinct weaponry, and literal piles of golden riches. When I first saw this one back in the day, I imagined they would show Atlantis in a stereotypical underwater fashion, but it didn't. And as a result, the special ended up feeling a lot more original in hindsight. Tons of lore was baked into this one too, and it really brought the environment to life through telling a story about a war for Atlantis. Essentially, the Atlanteans we see in this special are actually aliens who brutally colonized Atlantis long before this special takes place, only to later abandon their expansionism in favor of pacifism. It was a really well told story that went over my head as a kid. They didn't dumb things down at all, and I really think the lore colors it brightly. What's especially neat is how the story's explanatory power goes pretty deep, explaining why the place feels alien in decor, why Atlantis went missing to begin with, and why the Atlanteans value harmony to a point where they avoid interacting with others altogether. All the little dots just start to connect with this lore in mind. Like the name Atlantis itself, I really thought for the longest time that it was simply a poor choice for a title, but now I realize they just never spelled out why the city went missing to begin with, and that SpongeBob's version of Atlantis goes way deeper with its own path, since it became a lost city due to the aliens we see wanting separation to preserve peace. Cool lore is cool, but at the end of the day, this one's ultimately a musical, so how does it do on the song front? After careful consideration, I've come to the conclusion that they slap pretty flippin' hard. Sure, you got a couple that are mainly used just to develop the plot that don't sound as great as a result, but what about the others? The opening one sounded good, got in and out, and played up the drama in a comedic manner. It served as a great intro to the special since it sounded nice, advanced the plot, and had humor that landed. Then that video game one later on. Making the retro gaming visuals match the beat of the song was clever and entertaining. And once again, it got in and out, so even if it's not fully your jam, it doesn't even stay long enough for you to get bored of it. And then both Squidward and Mr. Krabs' songs were quite good, and the Plankton song, while maybe not sounding quite as good as the others, had a very memorable art style and some good humor. The only song I really disliked, per se, was the closing one since it felt a bit slower and like it only existed to conclude the special. Not a bad batting average overall, though. This one definitely feels more like a short movie than a special in a good way. While imperfect, particularly on the unsettling patchy bits, I think this one is way too underrated since it manages to consistently hold interest throughout the 44-minute runtime, casually giving great songs, lore, and jokes consistently. Easily a solid upper A-tier special, despite common consensus. SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout. This is a special that a lot of people love. It feels properly celebratory of 20 years of SpongeBob in a way that completely outclasses Truth or Square, ringing lots of nostalgia bells along the way. Its pacing is quite good and stays entertaining throughout, despite being 4 times the size of a regular episode. And even though both the opening and middle portions are strong, the strongest part in the whole special is when the voice actors play their characters' parts live. This is probably one of those things that wouldn't appeal to anyone who's just casually into the show, but for a special aiming to celebrate the series, it was absolutely a great move and appealed very strongly to long-term fans. Honestly, the biggest weakness with this entire special is the season it was released in, since the typical challenges that come along with it were found here. Like most of Season 12, this special has weaker humor, animation that tries too hard, and generally doesn't have dialogue that feels as intelligently crafted. Still though, it's impossible not to like this special simply because at the end of the day, it's in its own category of episode type and completely achieves its mission nearly flawlessly to celebrate 20 freaking years of SpongeBob. Though I may also just be biased since I was actually lucky enough to get to appear as an extra in one of the live action bits when it was being filmed. It was a lot of fun. For those of you curious, here I am right here. They didn't pay me much, just a hot dog and a handshake, but I was just happy to get to be a part of it. Anyways, after this, the episode wraps up nicely, and since the happy birthday song was still a protected song at the time, they ended up making a birthday edition of the intro theme that I personally think sounded infinitely better than the famous and terrible sounding happy birthday song. Overall, this one is a very high-ranking special, and I think that if it animated fewer butts and put out stronger jokes, or maybe had a bit more nuance in the story, it'd be a clear S-tier episode, no doubt, particularly because of the live-action part with the voice actors. But overall to me personally, when accounting for the special in its entirety, it lands in high A-tier, just a whisker shy of S. Dunces and Dragons. Now this is how you make a SpongeBob special feel special. The premise is instantly engaging. SpongeBob and Patrick get catapulted back to medieval times, and suddenly we've got knights, kings, peasants, and the whole Bikini Bottom crew medievalified. The creativity here is off the charts. Every character redesign feels spot on, and the world building is surprisingly rich for just a 22-minute cartoon. What really elevates this one is the balance. You got adventure, you got comedy, and you've even got some genuine stakes. SpongeBob and Patrick legitimately feel like they're on a great, noble quest, and it makes the whole special feel bigger than your standard episode. A lot of the one-liners land really well in this special, showing off clever writing and timing. Also, the running gag throughout it of SpongeBob and Patrick thinking everybody else is just role-playing was capitalized on perfectly. Seriously, it so easily could have felt cliched, enough so that on paper, I would have assumed that it wouldn't have worked at all, but the comedic timing kept it feeling fresh and fun. Pacing-wise, rock solid on the whole. From the time travel setup to the final battle with Planktonomore, everything feels purposeful and satisfying. If I had to give one critique, it's that the humor isn't quite as laugh-out-loud constant as something like Chocolate with Nuts, since this one's more of a constant stream of really good yet not amazing jokes. But the thing is, the comedy is still pretty solid overall, and at the end of the day, it's just extra seasoning. This one is going for scope and spectacle with its whole quest vibe, and it nails that perfectly. It even ends with a surprisingly heartfelt wrap-up with Saving Pearl, making it a special that hits the trifecta of action, comedy, and some emotional resonance. Overall, Dunces and Dragons is absolutely one of the strongest SpongeBob specials. It's imaginative, it's memorable, and it's the kind of special that really shows just how versatile this show can be. I seriously didn't appreciate it enough as a kid, but it aged like a fine wine. It's our first S-tier entry. Christmas Who is an all-around heavyweight champion of a special. The charm is in bucket loads. The humor lands hard. Not only are there emotionally resonant moments, there are entire character arcs we see play out here within this 22-minute time span, particularly with Squidward. The music is great, the theming is great. The highlights of this special really just keep going. It's the first ever episode with an extended runtime. The first ever episode to feature Patchy the Pirate or Potty the Parrot. The first to use an alternative theme song excluding the unreleased pilot. The first to make me cry cause, you guys, it's just so touching. First to feature Sandy without her ever wearing her helmet. Ignore all those other little bits of history, y'all, because that's the one that's the most significant. I just love Christmas Who. It absolutely nails what it's going for, and actually ended up being pretty interesting plot-wise too, rather than picking one of the 4 stories TV shows usually use for Christmas. Alright, so SpongeBob introduced Bikini Bottom to Christmas after learning about it from Sandy, but then there's a wild plot twist. So one minute, you got all the usual trimmings of a piece of Christmas media, right? Squidward playing the part of a skeptic grump, saying Santa isn't real, SpongeBob being hyped up, and the rest of the town being pretty festive. But then, Santa doesn't come, proving Squidward right. Squidward revels in it for a little bit, but eventually realizes that even if he was right, he was wrong. He never should have hurt SpongeBob's feelings and mocked him so openly, when all SpongeBob wanted to do was bring him a smile. He ends up developing a resolve to give SpongeBob a good day, dressing up as Santa and greeting him, and even giving all his stuff away as he helps the whole town, yet felt good in the process of doing it. The emotional beats are never in your face, but feel strong just through the quality of the storytelling and subtlety. I don't think I've ever seen another piece of children's media say, Santa's not real, but even so, you shouldn't be a jerk about it to people that think he is. It's an odd but quite original message, and of course it's also paired with the more typical giving feels better than getting message, but the first especially resonated with me growing up. Squidward's character growth in this episode was something beautiful to see, since he ended up truly regretting his actions and doing everything in his power to make things right again. But let's talk music right quick. The song in this special goes hard, not gonna lie. It's catchy, festive, upbeat, and shows the town in unison, even with Krabs and Plankton. It probably doesn't quite crack the top 3 songs in the show, but I'm pretty confident it'd be in the top 10. Overall, I gotta say this special is so good that it's worth watching at any point in the year, even in April, September, or other non-Christmas months. This isn't just a great SpongeBob special, it's one of the best pieces of Christmas media ever made. S tier, no contest. Have You Seen the Snail is the most emotionally compelling SpongeBob special ever made. From the opening setup, the significance is immediately conveyed. Gary feels neglected, leaves SpongeBob behind, and what follows is a genuinely heartbreaking tale about abandonment and longing. Normally, I find it annoying anytime SpongeBob cries, but in this episode, it very much feels earned and appropriate rather than obnoxious. The writers took a real risk with this episode. Having just changed writing crews after the movie released between seasons 3 and 4, it would have been a lot easier to play it safe and try to copy what the original writers were doing with the series. But instead, we got this masterfully constructed special that to this day stays in the conversation for meaningful SpongeBob moments. What makes it even crazier is the fact that this is only the 3rd episode of season 4. Almost immediately, they went in a completely different direction towards their own unique vision. A lot of times in SpongeBob, after something emotionally significant occurs, it gets undercut by humor. But here, as weird as it sounds to say, the writers intentionally chose to hold back on the humor at times, and it greatly enhanced the episode as a result. The final packaging of this special will leave you emotionally exhausted in a good way, since it alternates between genuinely hilarious moments and genuinely touching emotional beats. Gary Come Home is the absolute best original song made for the show in my opinion, and has gone down as absolutely iconic. What makes it work so well is the pair of a fresh original sound and lyrics that further deepen and add nuance to the character's emotions. SpongeBob clearly blames himself for losing Gary, something the song makes very clear, and you can really feel a sense of desperation from SpongeBob in this song that to many would understandably jerk a tear. Not for me though, of course. Fish don't have tear ducts. Anyways, the tone is gloomy but never boring, and the pacing keeps you invested the entire way through. Also, that closet reveal. Dozens of broken snail shells everywhere. The grandma owner person suddenly acting all menacing like Gary saw something he really shouldn't have. I swear, my childhood soul left my body in terror when I first saw this. The fact that the episode heavily implied that the grandma character was only taking in snails to fatten them up and eat them was so scary and done with the perfect balance of subtlety and directness. Without hardly any warning beforehand, other than a bit of subtle foreshadowing, Gary suddenly realized he had to leave immediately, making for a surprisingly tense chase scene, or at least the most tense a chase scene can be between a snail and a grandma. It's crazy how this special, in addition to landing well both emotionally and comedically, also had probably the most sick and impactful plot twist in the whole series. Perfect amounts and execution of horror. Anyways, I've been going on for a while now about how amazing this special is, but if I had to nitpick a few flaws for this, I'd point to the very beginning and the very end, since they both have some light pacing problems. The beginning takes its time starting off, which is fine, but the fact it took 7 minutes for the plot to really get to where SpongeBob is actually looking for Gary implies it could have afforded to trim some of that runtime. Ideally, donating that time to the ending since the ending felt a little bit too quick. It's only in the final 20 seconds that SpongeBob has actually found Gary, and the fact it just ends after that feels a little abrupt. A slightly slower resolution would have made the emotional payoff more powerful, I think. But honestly, that's small potatoes compared to how much this episode sticks with you. Have You Seen the Snail shows SpongeBob at its most heartfelt, proving the series can both make you laugh and cry within the same 22 minutes. For me, this is an easy S tier special. Beautiful, emotional, and unforgettable. Alright, 41 SpongeBob specials have been covered and we're about to declare the winner. Honestly, I really debated between this one and Have You Seen the Snail for the #1 spot, but I ultimately decided that the comedy of the one I chose trumps the emotional resonance of Have You Seen the Snail. Maybe some of you already know which one it is, but let's be real. With 42 entries in total, ain't no way process of elimination is gonna be easy without at least having something to write on.
Get over it!
Without further ado, I'm gonna shut up and show the final entry. A pow for Gary. Okay, you know that's a fake out. Obviously, it's not a pow for Gary. That's not even a special, and it sucks. The real winner of the manly clownfish ranking every special video is Shanghai! What a special! It may not bring the feels as much as Have You Seen This Snail or throw you into some wild new world like Dunces and Dragons, but this is one of the funniest episodes of SpongeBob in general. It just does not quit with the jokes and has no downtime whatsoever. The dialogue on this special is just stuffed to the brim with funny quotable moments.
Squidward! The sky had a baby from my cereal box! Squidward! Squidward, the sky had a baby!
What's crazy is that not only do most of the jokes land, but the variety is insane. You've got physical gags like the perfume department, character-driven humor, sarcasm, straight-up absurdity, references, slapstick, puns, random non-sequiturs, all cranked up to 11, and somehow they all land. This special has comedic genius and feels quite rewatchable as a result. But beyond comedy, every main character shines in Shanghai. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward are all at their absolute peaks, each getting in very clever lines. And the Flying Dutchman himself has his biggest role to date. Something that makes Shanghai extra fascinating is its shifting identity through the years. Little history here. When it first aired, it was actually called You Wish. It ran for a full 23 minutes and had a live call-in vote where fans could decide who got the wishes at the end. Since then, it's been cut down to 16 minutes, usually just showing the SpongeBob ending. But the alternative endings are still floating around on DVDs, YouTube, and sometimes even Paramount Plus. Having different endings is a really cool concept, and it's interesting how in all three endings, they never escape the Dutchman. Also, out of pure curiosity, I tried calling the original phone number for the voting, and nowadays it's just some random Medicare scam number, so that sucks. Anyways, while Shanghai may not feel as specially as some of the other ones on this list, it's got fun endings, some of the best patchy segments, and most importantly, S-tier comedy from start to finish.
Moving behind the rocks!
Keep going! You're good! You're good! You're good!
This easily punches right into the S-tier category as it's a prime example of something I'd show someone if I was just introducing them to SpongeBob for the very first time. I absolutely love Shanghai. I think if we're talking strictly about specials that really play into the fact it's a special, Have You Seen This Snail would take first place. But if the focus is just overall enjoyability, or anything that has an extended runtime and is therefore considered a special, yeah, Shanghai takes first place just because of how freaking hilarious it is. But we're kinda just splitting hairs. Both of these specials show SpongeBob at its best, and it really just comes down to whichever flavor you're in the mood for. Let me know what takes you guys have and where you agree or disagree with me on this list. No one's opinion is gospel, certainly not mine, and I'm sure there's gonna be some stuff that you guys flat out disagree with on this list. If you want another list-style video on special things SpongeBob has made, check out my video here where I rank every SpongeBob movie, since there's everything from abominations to underrated gems to our classic 2004 movie. It's a good time. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.